The dumbbell lateral raise is an overrated exercise. Now, when I say overrated, I don't necessarily mean bad or worse than other options. I just mean that for the goal specifically of training the middle delts, relative to the other options that we have available, I think that it less efficiently and less effectively accomplishes that goal. So today we're going to talk about why, and not only why, but I'm also going to provide other solutions, other exercises that you can do instead to maybe maximize your efficiency in training, and specifically in targeting the middle delts. So first things first, when we talk about the traditional dumbbell lateral raise, we're talking about an exercise that is specifically meant to accomplish the goal of training the middle delt. Right? That's why most people choose the exercise, at least as far as I'm aware. And whenever we're breaking down an exercise, we can go through this exercise analysis process, which is basically a principle-based process that I use whenever I'm looking to understand an exercise, what it's doing, and maybe why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, right? Because ultimately, what you're feeling in terms of muscular response, comfort or discomfort, is really just a consequence of the mechanics of the motion. So if you can identify the mechanics of a motion and you can sort of dissect, okay, what are the forces doing and what are they trying to do to me, then you can understand, okay, why do I feel this thing when I really don't want to? And in the case of a dumbbell lateral raise, a lot of people feel they're trapped and a lot of weird stuff around their neck instead of their middle delt. So let's talk about why. So the first thing that we need to look at is the resistance, meaning just the weight that we're holding and essentially what it's trying to do to our bodies. And in addition, we need to look at the resistance from its point of contact. So in a dumbbell lateral raise, the point of contact usually is our hands. That's generally speaking, most people have to hold dumbbells. In the case of, like, let's say a cable lateral raise, you can actually do things differently. Like you can loop, the handle around your arm or something like that. So the point of contact can be different, but for a dumbbell lateral raise, it is in the hands. In addition, we need to look at its direction. So what direction the resistance is pulling us or pushing us. All resistances have specific directions that may change at various points in the exercise depending on the specific implement that we're using. But in the case of a free weight, in the case of a dumbbell is always trying to fall downward, right? So we know that we have this resistance, which comes from a dumbbell, and how it acts relative to gravity. We know that its contact point relative to us is at our hands, and we know that it has a direction that is directly downward toward the center of the earth. Now, in addition, when we're looking at exercises, we need to understand how these first three things, these first three variables, interact with our muscular leverage, right? Muscles have specific amounts of leverage, meaning essentially how strong they are and how much they can act in specific positions relative to other muscles. And we need to look at all these things in concert, because if we don't, we may be, in the case of a dumbbell lateral raise, mismatching our mechanics and our leverage in specific tissues with where an exercise may be heavier or lighter. So looking at a dumbbell lateral raise, just to orient yourselves, this is the same guy, just sort of in all these different iterations here, holding a dumbbell and doing a raise, right? So these ones are still him and still him and still him. These are just translucent. And this is essentially the point, again, just drawing that contact point, which is the heaviest point of the exercise. That really comes down to torque. And torque you can just think about as our experience of resistance. And when things move farther away from us and we're holding them, generally speaking, they are heavier. And so what this means is that the heaviest portion of this motion is at the top, where this distance is farthest, and the lightest portion is at the bottom, where this distance, if we look at it, horizontally, and we were to draw the line of resistance down, the dumbbell just pulling us down. If we were to sort of extend this line of resistance back upward toward the shoulder, you see that it basically goes right through the shoulder, meaning that there's very little or no horizontal distance. So what does that mean? The dumbbell lateral raise, and many of you intuitively know this, you don't need to diagram out the physics in the resistance direction. The dumbbell lateral raise is very, very light at the bottom and very, very heavy at the top. Now, conversely, we have to ask ourselves, where does the middle delt have the most amount of leverage? Where is it strongest, and where can it most effectively rotate the arm? The answer is in the bottom of the motion. Now, this comes down to a lot of things that are muscle-specific related that I don't want to get into in this particular video, because it would end up just sort of becoming very tangential and very confusing, I think, for a lot of you. So just for now, the middle delt, if you can imagine this person's arm in this position, right now imagine this is the arm, the middle delt has its best and strongest mechanics in this position, meaning that in order to take the arm this way out to the side, and then up, and then up, and then up, the middle delt starts from its strongest position here, and it gets toward its weakest position all the way over here. But what you'll notice is that the dumbbell lateral raise is actually inverse to that, meaning that the dumbbell lateral raise is heaviest here, and it is lightest here in this bottom position, right? So these red lines indicating just the position of the arm. So at the bottom of the motion, we essentially have a position where we are strongest, where there's no resistance. And then at the top of the motion, we have a position where we are weakest. In other words, other things need to contribute more, like the traps, right, that everyone's feeling on a dumbbell lateral raise, and where concomitantly the weight is heaviest. So it doesn't really make too much sense to me that we're doing an exercise where it's heaviest is where we are least strong. So what should we do instead, and how can we sort of reconcile this issue? Well, the easiest solution would be to do something like a cable raise. So this is me doing a cable raise, and what you'll notice is if I pause it in the bottom, this is not the perfect perspective to draw this from, the line of resistance is longest. I'm going to indicate this dotted line to draw that direction. And again, this is not technically the perspective that we would use to draw that line, but it will sort of serve its purpose here. And if I go to the top portion of the range of motion here, what you'll notice is that the cable now falls basically toward half that distance. So what that means is that at the beginning of the motion, i.e. in the bottom right here, I'm at my strongest and the cable is pulling on me the most. And as I progress through this motion upward, what you'll notice is that the cable actually gets lighter, meaning that it applies less resistance to me, where I am very weak and where other things will contribute more. So this is a scenario in which the mechanics of my body and my middle delt are perfectly aligned with the direction of resistance from its point of application, and all those things sort of coincide with the changing direction of the resistance relative to me and what my goals are. So what do you do if you don't have access to a cable for whatever reason? You can still use a dumbbell, but you have to kind of orient your body a little bit differently. So here's what I mean. If we orient our bodies this way with a single arm where I'm sort of bench supported, what we can do is get to a position where at the bottom, right, i.e. a lateral raise type position. Again, this is not exactly identical to this traditional lateral raise, right, because it's slightly in front of my body, but it's mostly the same in terms of its muscular effect. There are some subtle differences, but the point here being that the dumbbell is very, very heavy and very far from our shoulders at the bottom and very, very close to our shoulders at the top. And you can see that I don't even raise to the point where my arm is fully overhead, because, you know, you could basically just hold the dumbbell over your head and it would be applying effectively no resistance torque to the shoulder. So what is the take home here? The take home here is to utilize exercises and to utilize directions of resistance as it pertains to the middle delt, where the bottom of the motion, when your arm is here, or maybe in this position here, just to sort of demo it out, right? If this individual's arm was down here and here was the weight, right? You would want the weight to be pulling in this direction at this point, rather than 90 degrees from that direction where a dumbbell might have you pull. And again, we can do that with the dumbbell. It's not about the implement. It's about how the implement relates to us and how specifically we're lifting that implement and what range of motion we're using as a consequence, specifically as it relates to our goal. So again, you could do something like this where the bottom of the motion, that bottom position, is heavily, heavily loaded. But to do that, you need to sort of, do it single arm. You can't really do this double arm. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully those takeaways were clear. And the biggest message here is just load the arm, specifically as it pertains to middle delt stuff, significantly in the bottom and less significantly in the top. And what you'll end up with is an exercise where you're feeling mostly pure middle delt and then some, rear delt and front delt, depending on which way you do it. Like if you were to do this with your arm getting stretched behind your body, you would feel a little bit more front delt. In this variation, you'll get a little bit more rear delt. But in any case, if it's a raise, you're going to get a lot of the middle delt. And you're going to end up in a position where if you do load the bottom more significantly, you're going to be solely recruiting that guy at its maximum capacity, and you're going to be able to use a range of motion that doesn't sort of start to call upon overactive traps, which again is really just a consequence of your interaction with the resistance. If you like this video and you want to learn more from me, please consider enrolling in my online anatomy and biomechanics course. The course contains over 15 hours specifically dedicated to improving your understanding of anatomy and physics and how it applies to lifting weights. Over 3,000 students have enrolled in this course and have reported back that it's the most easy to digest material that doesn't include any sort of boring textbook lecture that you might normally find in a typical college curriculum. So if you want to improve your ability to lift and as a consequence grow muscle more easily and reduce your pain in the gym, check out the link in the description.